Hello, and welcome to the Sagebrush in Prisons project. The Sagebrush in Prisons project is a multi-state partnership that includes the Institute for Applied Ecology, Sustainability in Prisons project, the Bureau of Land Management, the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality, and various state Department of Corrections, including Oregon, Wyoming, Idaho, Nevada, and California. The purpose of the Sagebrush in Prisons project is to provide meaningful ecological activities to incarcerated adults with the goal of restoring native habitat for the greater sage-grouse. Let's learn more about sagebrush. Sagebrush is in the plant family Asteraceae. This is the same family that includes sunflowers and daisies. Sagebrush makes many tiny yellow flowers. Each plant can produce thousands of tiny seeds. The flowers mature in late summer and the seeds mature in the fall. The scientific name for sagebrush is Artemisia. Although there are many species and subspecies of sagebrush, the most common species of sagebrush that we grow is big sagebrush, or Artemisia tridentata. The name Artemisia tridentata comes from the shape of the leaves. The leaves are dentate, meaning that they look like teeth, and there are 3 teeth. So that's how they get the name Tridentata. The sagebrush steppe ecosystem encompasses a large part of the American West. It is characterized by the presence of sagebrush, other shrubs, and grasses. The sagebrush steppe is semi-arid, too dry to be a forest, but not dry enough to be a desert. It is the home of many animals, including the greater sage-grouse. How are sagebrush and sage-grouse connected? The greater sage-grouse is a sagebrush obligate species. It depends on sagebrush during every stage of its life. Sage-grouse hens lay 8 to 10 eggs underneath sagebrush plants. Then when sage-grouse chicks hatch, they hide from their predators underneath sagebrush. Their coloration helps them camouflage. Unlike many birds, sage-grouse do not have a gizzard for grinding up nuts and seeds. Sagebrush leaves and stems provide an important food source, especially during the winter. What the heck is a lek? A lek is an area where sage-grouse males gather in the spring to show off for females. They usually choose open areas where they can easily be seen. Male sage-grouse have yellow air sacs that they fill with air to make a drumming noise. Even though there may be 20 or 30 males in a lek, females usually pick only 1 to 2 males to mate with. You might be thinking, isn't there enough sagebrush already? Why are we growing more? In this map, we can see both the current and the historical greater sage-grouse distribution. Historically, greater sage-grouse were found in the green areas and in the blue areas, but today they're only found in the blue areas. Their range has been reduced by 50% due to loss of sagebrush habitat. There are also much less sage-grouse than there were in the past. It is estimated that there were once up to 16 million sage-grouse, whereas today there are only between 100,000 and 500,000 sage-grouse. So why have sage-grouse numbers declined? Well, one reason is that in the last few decades, wildfires have become more common in the sagebrush steppe. This is in part due to climate change, which has caused summers to be hotter and drier. Some fire is natural in this ecosystem, but humans have altered natural fire cycles by not allowing fires to burn. Without regular fires, vegetation can become overgrown, and this can lead to more destructive and larger fires. In the 1880s, a European grass called cheatgrass was accidentally introduced into the United States. Cheatgrass has roots that grow all winter, allowing it to outcompete native shrubs and grasses. Cheatgrass is very flammable and becomes very dry in the summer, and this is another factor that has increased fires. After a fire, native plants like sagebrush can take many years to recover, whereas cheatgrass can bounce back very quickly. Another reason that sagebrush habitat is declining is juniper encroachment. Sagebrush were historically the largest plants in the sagebrush steppe. The expansion of junipers shades out other plants and leads to competition for water and resources. Hawks and ravens also like to perch on these trees, and sage-grouse will avoid areas with lots of juniper because these are their predators. An increase in juniper trees can also lead to larger forest fires. Energy development of natural gas and oil can also cause sagebrush habitat to become fragmented into smaller areas. Sage-grouse will avoid areas of active energy development. Overgrazing by cattle can also be a problem. However, cattle and sage-grouse can coexist peacefully. Habitat restoration efforts for sage-grouse can create better rangelands with more food availability for cattle. There's a saying that goes, "What's good for the bird is good for the herd." Despite all of these challenges for sage-grouse, the good news is that together we can help restore sagebrush habitat. And it's not just sage-grouse. Sage-grouse are an umbrella species. By helping them, we also help many other plants and animals that depend on the sagebrush steppe ecosystem. The Sagebrush in Prisons project began in 2014 at Snake River Correctional Institute in Eastern Oregon. Today, our program is engaging adults in custody at 9 prisons and 5 states. Our programs also provide educational opportunities in prisons through hands-on lectures and workshops and through science and horticulture lessons. How do we grow sagebrush? The first step to growing sagebrush is collecting seed. Our BLM partners collect sagebrush seed in the fall when seeds are mature. Sagebrush seeds need to be cleaned by machines before we can use them. In April or May, adults in custody prepare soil and sow sagebrush seeds in containers. Sagebrush needs light to germinate. It takes about 1 to 2 weeks for seeds to germinate. Germination is the process by which a plant grows from a seed. During the summer months, sagebrush technicians at each prison are responsible for watering plants daily, fertilizing weekly, and thinning the sagebrush so that there is only one seedling in each cone. By October, sagebrush seedlings have grown tall and their roots fill out the containers. Adults in custody box up the plants, and BLM partners pick up the plants from the prisons. Sagebrush are planted at restoration sites in October and November. In some cases, work crews from the prisons are able to help with planting. At the end of every season, we have a certificate ceremony to honor and thank all of our program participants. Now we'll learn how to prepare soil and sow sagebrush seeds. The sagebrush soil mixture contains peat moss, vermiculite, and perlite. Peat moss is made up of moss that has decomposed without oxygen. It helps retain soil moisture and nutrients and helps prevent soil compaction. Vermiculite is made up of mined rocks that are heated and expanded into accordion-like shapes. Vermiculite helps retain soil moisture and nutrients. Perlite is made up of mined volcanic glass that is heated and expanded like popcorn. Perlite helps water drain from soil and prevents soil compaction. To mix soil, first lay out a large tarp and begin opening your soil bags and pouring them onto the tarp. Your sagebrush crew lead will give you a soil recipe so you know how many bags of each ingredient to mix together. Using shovels and rakes, several people can begin breaking down the soil. Your goal is to remove all the clumps so that the soil looks like an even mixture. At the same time, another person should be watering the soil. The soil should be moist, but not drenched with water. To check that your soil is moist enough, squeeze it together in your hand. If it sticks together, that means you added enough water. The process of mixing the soil will take the longest, so make sure you take your time and ensure that there are no clumps at the end. Now we'll learn how to fill the containers. Place a tray cover over your tray before you begin adding soil. Use a dustpan or a yogurt container to pour the soil on top of the tray cover, and then use your hands to smooth out the soil so that it falls into the cones. Then pick up the tray and hit it against the table so that the soil goes down into the containers. Continue adding more soil and slamming the trays against the table until they look completely full. Aha! I spotted some cones that weren't filled to the top, so I'll need to fill these all the way to the top. Okay, looks good. This is what your trays should look like when they're completely filled with soil. Don't move on to the next step unless your trays look like this. This step is important because as we water the cones all summer, the soil will slowly fall out of the bottom and we will lose soil in the process. So we want to make sure that our cones are nice and full at the beginning of the season. Once your cones are filled all the way to the top with soil, use the tampers to push down the level of the soil row by row. If you are sowing sagebrush and bitterbrush, you will need to use two different types of tampers. The tampers for the bitterbrush are slightly deeper than those for the sagebrush. Once you have filled many trays with soil, you can have one person start to water all of the cones. Water the cones until you see water coming out of the bottom of the cones to make sure that the soil is thoroughly moistened. Now that you've prepared the soil and filled and watered the cones, it's time to sow the sagebrush seeds. Using a hand seed sower filled with sagebrush seed, lightly tap the seeder against each cone to release the seeds. Your goal should be to get between 3 to 10 seeds in each cone, depending on the quality and the quantity of your seed. Make sure to refer to your coordinator's instruction for the best number at your institution. By the end of the season, we only want one plant per container. If you put too many seeds in each container, it will be harder to thin out the plants. Sagebrush seeds require light to germinate, so we do not want to cover the sagebrush seeds with soil. Sowing bitterbrush seeds is a little bit different. The seeds are much larger, and before we can sow them, they go through a process called cold stratification. Cold stratification is the process of germinating seeds by keeping them wet and cold. This can be accomplished by putting them in moist plastic bags and putting them in the fridge for several weeks. Bitterbrush seeds are adapted to go dormant, so it's hard to get them to germinate. By keeping them wet and cold, we can break their dormancy. Cold stratification mimics natural processes that would occur in winter. Because the seeds are already germinated when we plant them, they're very delicate and they must be handled very carefully. Bitterbrush seeds are placed on the surface of the cones, and then after you've seeded an entire tray, you can go back and add soil to cover the seeds. Question number 1. What is the main reason that sage-grouse numbers have declined? The correct answer is B, habitat loss. There are many factors that have led to a decline in sagebrush steppe habitat. Question number 2. Which of the following are true statements about sage-grouse? The correct answers are B and C. Sage-grouse lay their eggs underneath sagebrush, and their range has been reduced by 50%. Remember that sage-grouse can't eat seeds because they don't have a gizzard, and that's why they rely on sagebrush for food. Now take a few moments to match each picture with the name of a soil ingredient. The first picture is peat moss. It helps retain nutrients and moisture in soil and prevents soil compaction. The second picture is vermiculite. It retains nutrients and moisture in soil. And the third picture is perlite. It helps water drain from soil and reduces soil compaction. Okay, last question. How many sagebrush seeds should you put in each container? The correct answer is 3 to 10 seeds. Your sagebrush coordinator will give you more specific instructions, but 3 to 10 seeds is a general number. By the end of the season, we only want 1 seedling in each container, but we start off with 3 to 10 seeds in case some of the seeds don't germinate.